Hello researchers! Welcome back to our YouTube channel. This is me again, Teacher Tin May. Syempre ang kasama mo sa iyong
research journey.
If you're new to this channel, don't forget to subscribe, like, and hit the notification bell for more updates in Research 1. Okay, like what we said the last time we had our lesson vlog about week 1, quarter 3 of our Research 1. So this is a continuation of our week 1 in Research 1. So it's all about experimenting. So the last time we talked about the BSL or the biosafety level and the protocol. So this time we're going to discuss about the risk assessment and the disposal when we are conducting science investigatory project. What do you think is the importance of knowing these protocols, knowing this risk assessment when we are conducting science investigatory project? Yes, napaka-importante na dapat na-assess natin muna yung mga ginagawa nating experiment before we proceed with any science investigatory project. Dahil unang-una, maraming mga risk na pwede nating ma-encounter when we are doing or conducting such experiment. At kagaya na lang ng mga ginagawa ng mga scientists, yes, na mga researchers, kagaya na lang ng, for example, paggagawa ng vaccine for COVID-19. Since they are more exposed to virus, syempre kasi kailangan nila yun para mas malaman nila kung effective ba itong vaccine na ginagawa nila. So, ito yung mga examples na talagang kailangan talaga na alam natin yung mga risk assessment when we are conducting any science investigatory project or any simple science research or science experiment. Okay, so in this lesson vlog, before we discuss the different risk assessment for conducting science investigatory under the potentially hazardous chemical agents, potential hazardous devices, or any experiments that involve human participants and vertebrate animals. So let us discuss first risk assessment. Ano ba kapag sinabi nating risk assessment at ano naman ba ang importance of knowing this risk assessment? And aside from this, alamin din natin kung kailan ba dapat malaman yung mga risk assessment. Is it done before conducting the experiment or during the experiment or after the experiment? So, when should a risk assessment be done? First question, what is risk assessment?
Now, what is risk assessment? Risk assessment are conducted by evaluating the way in which the infectious agents or toxin is transmitted and its ability to cause disease, the activities performed in the laboratory, the safety equipment and the design elements present in the laboratory, the availability of preventive medical countermeasures or treatment, and the health and training of the laboratory worker. For example, some procedures with an infectious agent or toxin may be conducted under BSL-2 conditions, but other procedures with the same infectious agent or toxin that increase the risk to the worker or environment, such as the creation of airborne droplets or sprays, or large-scale production, may require the work be conducted under BSL-3 conditions.
When we say risk assessment, so it determines the biosafety level, which in turn determines if the project can proceed, and if so, the laboratory facilities, equipment, training, and supervision is required. So, kasi pag in-assess natin, ano ba yung mga possible danger na maaari ko ma-encounter while doing this activity, while doing this experiment. So, kung masyado pa lang malupit yung mga danger na pwede mong ma-encounter, so, syempre, kinakailangan na meron tayong mga qualified scientists or meron tayong mga expert dun sa field na ginagawa natin na maaaring mag-supervise dun sa ginagawa natin. Kasi syempre, as a student researcher, hindi pa ganun kalawak yung alam natin sa particular study na gagawin natin. So, importante na meron tayong qualified scientists or meron tayong mga expert na nasa tabi natin or nasa likodan natin para mag-supervise sa atin at ma-guide tayo on how we can proceed in this kind of science investigatory project na hindi naman tayo mapapahamak, hindi lang yung sarili natin, hindi lang yung iba, at pati na rin yung ating environment. Remember that when dealing with potentially hazardous biological agents, it is the responsibility of the student and all of the adults involved in the research project to conduct and document a risk assessment on Form 6. Okay, yung Form 6, diniscuss ko itong different forms sa aking ibang lesson vlog. So you can, I will also write down in the description box the topic about the research forms. So may mga iba't ibang forms na kailangan tayong i-prepare when we are conducting science investigatory project para mas lalong ma-assess kung ano ba yung mga kinakailangan while doing or conducting the science investigatory project. So just like what I said, kailangan i-prepare the document doon sa Risk Assessment Form 6 to define the potential level of harm, okay, injury or disease to plants, animals, and humans that may occur when working with biological agents. Okay, next question. Why is risk assessment important? Bakit nga ba kailangan pa? Ano bang meron dito? Bakit kailangan pa na merong risk assessment? Okay, remember that risk assessments are very important as they form an integral part of an occupational health and safety management plan. This risk assessment will help to create awareness of hazards and risk. Number 2, it identifies who may be at risk. For example, your employees, the cleaners, the visitors, the contractors, the public, your co-students or your classmates, your teachers, your parents, okay, etc. Madami pa. So, kailangan talaga ma-identify natin para kung sino ba yung mga pwedeng mapahamak while doing this activity or while doing this science investigatory project. Number 3, this risk assessment will also determine whether a control program is required for a particular hazard. So, sino ba yung mga kailangan na hingan natin ng tulong while doing this activity, while doing this science investigatory project? Next, this risk assessment will also determine if existing control measures are adequate or if more should be done. Another thing, okay, it prevents injuries or illnesses, especially when done at the design of planning stage. And of course, this risk assessment prioritizes hazards and control measures. And of course, this risk assessment meets legal requirements where applicable. So, ito yung mga importance kung bakit ba kailangan na i-assess muna natin itong mga risk na possible na ma-encounter natin during the investigation. Another question, when should a risk assessment be done? Kailan ba natin kailangan gawin itong pag-assess sa mga danger and risk na possible nating ma-encounter? Before ba? During? Or after? What do you think? There may be many reasons a risk assessment is needed, and this includes the following. We have 3. Number 1, before new processes or activities are introduced. So, merong mga pagkakataon na kailangan i-introduce na natin at i-assess bago pa natin simulan na gawin itong science investigatory project. Siyempre, para mas maganda na yung before pa tayo mag-conduct ng science investigatory project, alam na natin kung kailan at ano ang pwede nating ma-encounter. Number 2, before changes are introduced to existing processes or activities, including when products, machinery, tools, equipment, change or new information concerning harm becomes available. And number 3, the last, when hazards are identified. For the continuation of our discussion, so in the following video, we're going to discuss about the risk assessment for studies that involves human participants, vertebrate animals, potentially hazardous biological agents, and of course, hazardous chemical agents, activities, and devices, risk assessment, and of course, the guidance for risk assessment. So, stay tuned hanggang dulo at para mas maunawaan pa natin yung topic about risk assessment and of course, disposal.
Now, let's proceed with the guidance for risk assessment. So, the following guidance on conducting risk assessment when using the following. Number 1 is hazardous chemicals. Another one is hazardous devices. And also radiation. Now, let's talk about hazardous chemicals. A proper risk assessment of chemicals must include review of the following factors: toxicity, reactivity, flammability, and corrosiveness. When we say toxicity, this is the tendency of a chemical to be hazardous to health when inhaled, swallowed, injected, or in contact with the skin. Reactivity, this is the tendency of a chemical to undergo chemical change. While flammability, I know you are very familiar with this. So this is the tendency of a chemical to give off vapors which readily ignite when used under normal working conditions. And lastly, we have corrosiveness, the tendency of a chemical upon physical contact to harm or destroy living tissues or physical equipment. Remember that when assessing risk, the type and amount of exposure to a chemical must be considered. For example, an individual's allergic and genetic disposition may have an influence on the overall effect of the chemical. The student researcher must refer to the safety data sheets provided by the vendor or the SDS to ensure that proper safety precautions are taken. Some SDS sheets, for example, Flynn rank or the degree of hazard. The Flynn rank, the degree of hazard associated with chemical. This rating may assist students or adult sponsors in determining risk associated with the use of chemical. A risk assessment form, this is the Form 3 risk assessment form, must include proper disposal methods for chemicals used in an experiment. And we have the Flynn catalog, this is the reference in the sources of information section, must provide information for the proper disposal of chemicals. If applicable, the student researcher must incorporate in the research plan disposal procedure required by federal and state guidelines. And we also have hazardous devices. The documentation of risk assessment, again, this is Risk Assessment Form 3, is required when a student researcher works with potentially hazardous dangerous equipment and or other devices in or outside a laboratory setting that require a moderate to high level of expertise to ensure their safe usage. Okay, this assessment form is explained in our another topic, and I will put that in our description box. The topic about different research forms, which is really important when you are conducting science investigatory projects, especially if you are competing for the Intel ISEF or the research competition. Some commonly used devices such as Bunsen burners, hot plates, saw, and drills may not require a documented risk assessment, assuming that the student researcher has experience working with the device. Use of other potentially dangerous devices such as high vacuum equipment, heated oil baths, NMR equipment, and high temperature ovens must have documentations of a risk assessment. And it is recommended that all student-designed inventions also have documentation and or risk assessment. Okay, now let's proceed with radiation. A risk assessment on a document Form 3 again. So, gamit na gamit ang risk assessment Form 3. So, So must be conducted when students' project involves radiation beyond that normally encountered in everyday life. Non-ionizing radiation includes the spectrum of ultraviolet, the UV, the visible light, the infrared, microwave or the NW, radio frequency RF, and extremely low frequency ELF. Now, let's proceed with human participants' risk assessment. Okay, we can use this information to help determine the level of risk involved in a study involving human participants. All human participant projects are considered to have some level of risk. No more than minimal risk exists when the probability and magnitude of harm or discomfort anticipated in research are not greater in and of themselves than those ordinarily encountered in everyday life or during performance of routine physical or psychological examinations or tests. More than minimal risk exists when possibility of physical or psychological harm or harm related to breach of confidentiality or invasion of privacy. Most of these studies require documented informed consent or minor assent with the permission of parent or guardian as applicable. Now, what are the examples of greater than minimal physical risk? First, exercise other than ordinarily encountered in everyday life. Another one is ingestion, tasting, smelling, or application of a substance. However, ingestion or tasting projects that involve commonly available food or drink will be evaluated by the IRB, which determines risk level based upon the nature of the study and local norms. Another one is exposure to any potentially hazardous material. Okay, now let's talk about the examples of greater than minimal psychological risk. A research activity, for example, survey, questionnaire, viewing of stimuli, or experimental condition that could potentially result in emotional stress. Some examples include answering questions related to personal experiences such as sexual or physical abuse. It can also be about divorce, depression, anxiety, answering questions that could result in feelings of depression, anxiety, or low self-esteem, or viewing violent or distressing video images. Now, another example is for the privacy concerns. The student researcher and IRB must consider whether an activity could potentially result in negative consequences for the participant due to invasion of privacy or breach of confidentiality. Protecting confidentiality requires measures to ensure that identifiable research data are not disclosed to the public or unauthorized individuals. Now, let's talk about the risk groups. If the research study includes participants from any of the following groups, the IRB and the student research must consider whether the nature of the study requires special protections or accommodations. Okay, number 1, any member of a group that is naturally at risk. What are those examples? Pregnant women, developmentally disabled persons, economically or educationally disadvantaged persons, individuals with diseases such as cancer, asthma, diabetes, AIDS or HIV, dyslexia, cardiac disorders, psychiatric disorders, or learning disorder, or etc. Okay, another one, special groups that are protected by federal regulations or guidelines. Example, children and minors, prisoners, pregnant women, students receiving services under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act or IDEA. Now, let's talk about the potentially hazardous biological agents risk assessment. Risk assessment defines the potential level of harm, injury, or disease to plants, animals, and humans that may occur when working with biological agents. The end result of a risk assessment is the assignment of biosafety level, which then determines the laboratory facilities, equipment, training, and supervision required. Risk assessment involves the following: assignment of the biological agent to a risk group. Studies involving unknown microorganisms must begin with an initial assignment of the microorganism to a biosafety level risk group based on information available through a literature research. The study of unknown microorganisms and the use of fresh tissues relies on the expertise of the supervising adults. Determination of the level of biological containment available to the student researcher to conduct the experimentation. Assessment of the experience and expertise of the adult supervising the student. Assignment of biosafety level for the study based on risk group or biological agent. Level of biological containment available and the expertise of the qualified scientist or designated supervisor who will be supervising the project. Documentation of review and approval of study prior to experimentation. Number 1, if a study is conducted at a non-regulated site, for example, school, the SRC reviews the research plan or project summary. Another one, if the study was conducted at a regulated research institution and was approved by the appropriate institutional board, for example, the IBC, the IACUC, the SRC reviews the institutional forms provided and documents SRC approval or Form 6. Form 6 is Potentially Hazardous Biological Agents Risk Assessment Form. And lastly, if a PHBA study was conducted at a regulated research institution, but the institution does not require review for this type of study, the SRC must review the study and document approval on Form 6 that the student receive appropriate training and the project complies with Intel ISEF rules.
This is the end of our lesson vlog for this week. Thank you for watching and thank you for listening. I hope you learned something from this lesson. For our next lesson vlog for Quarter 3, Module 3, Week 3, so we're going to discuss about gathering data and we're going to discuss about the different types of data and the methods of collecting data and of course the time and frequency of collection. So sana ay samahan nyo pa rin ako hanggang sa mga susunod nating lesson vlog. This is me again, Teacher Tin May, ang kasama mo sa iyong journey. Of course, if you're new to this channel, don't forget to subscribe, like, and hit the notification bell for more updates in Research 1. Bye and see you next week!